the peaceful little village of Makoma, where the trees whispered secrets and the river sang soft songs, lived a gentle girl named Nia. She had eyes full of wonder and a heart raised on bedtime stories of true love and happy endings, told by her grandmother, Mama Thandi. Nia believed in love, the way some people believe in the sun. Even when it's hidden, she knew it was there. One quiet afternoon, a stranger arrived in the village, a man named Sekou. He had a smile that seemed to carry promises and a voice that could make even the shyest flowers bloom. He noticed Nia right away. He said her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He listened to her like every word she said mattered. And Nia, who had never been looked at like that before, felt her heart leap in ways she couldn't explain. Every day, Sekou brought her little gifts, a carved bracelet, a sweet mango, stories from faraway town. But the greatest gift he gave her was his attention. He told her she was special, that he had been searching for someone like her. He painted dreams of a future, a small home, children laughing, love that would never end. And Nia, so full of hope, believed him. She believed every word, because when you've been waiting your whole life for a love like the ones in stories, sometimes you fall before you see where you're landing. At first, everything felt like a dream to Nia. Sekou still smiled at her the same way, still held her hand, like she was his world. But slowly, the dream started to crack. The whispers began in the corners of the village, quiet, careful, like people were afraid of breaking something fragile. They said Sekou was not always where he said he was, that in nearby towns, he was seen laughing with other women, his arm around someone new, his eyes never settled. Nia heard the whispers, of course. It was hard not to in a place as small as Makoma, but she tried to block them out. She told herself people were jealous or bored. She told herself that Sekou loved her. He had said so 100 times. Love needs trust, right? That's what Mama Thandi always said. But deep down, a small worry started growing in her heart, like a weed she couldn't pull out. Then one day, her best friend Amala came to her, not with rumors or gossip, but with quiet concern. She sat next to Nia under the big mango tree they used to climb as kids. Her voice was soft, careful. Nia, she said, I know you love him, but I've seen things. I think you should ask him the truth. Nia looked at her, heart pounding. She wanted to scream. She wanted to cry. But instead, she smiled, a small, sad smile. Love needs faith, she whispered. If I don't believe in him, who will? Amala's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't argue. She just reached out and squeezed Nia's hand. Inside, Nia was shaking. Her heart was trying to tell her something wasn't right, but her love for Sekou was loud, louder than fear, louder than doubt. So she closed her ears to the village, turned her eyes away from the truth, and held tighter to the man she had given her heart to. Because sometimes, when you want something to be true, you'll believe anything, even the lies that hurt you most. The wedding was small, but beautiful. Nia wore a light blue dress she stitched with her own hands, and Sekou smiled as if he had won a prize. Everyone clapped and cheered, and Nia felt like the happiest girl in the world. She thought this was the beginning of forever, the love story she had always dreamed about. But it didn't take long for things to change. The same man who once called her beautiful now told her what she could wear. That skirt is too short, he said once. You don't need to look nice for anyone but me. At first, Nia thought he was just being protective, maybe even loving. She changed clothes and told herself it was okay. Then he started telling her where she could go. You don't need to visit Amali today. Stay home, he would say. When she smiled at someone in the market, his eyes turned cold. Why were you smiling at him? He asked. She laughed nervously, brushing it off. No one, she replied, just being polite. But the more time passed, the smaller her world became. He picked who she could talk to. He checked her phone. He scolded her for taking too long at the shop. And every time she tried to speak up, he'd say, I'm your husband. I know what's best. And Nia, who had never been married before, believed maybe this was just how love worked. Maybe this is what being a wife meant, giving up parts of yourself to make things work. So she stayed quiet. She smiled less. She stopped meeting friends. Even her laughter, the one that once made Sekou say he loved her voice, began to fade. Mama Thandi noticed. She would gently ask, Are you happy, child? And Nia would nod quickly, too quickly, saying, Of course, Mama. But inside, something was breaking. Love didn't feel warm anymore. It felt heavy, like a weight on her chest. But still, she kept telling herself this was normal, that all couples had hard days, that maybe love meant sacrifice. And so, day by day, Naya disappeared, not all at once, but piece by piece. It was a quiet evening, the kind Nia used to love, soft wind through the window, the smell of rain in the air. She'd cooked Sekou's favorite meal, hoping maybe, just maybe, they could talk like they used to. Her heart was tired, but it still held on. She sat beside him, eyes full of tears she had been holding back for too long. "I love you," she said softly. "I truly love you, despite everything." Her voice cracked, her hands trembling. She wasn't blaming him, just begging for peace, for a little kindness. But instead of hearing her heart, Sekou only heard his pride. He had come home angry that day. Someone at the market had told him they saw Nia smiling at another man. Just a smile, nothing more. But Sekou's face twisted with rage, and Nia saw something in his eyes that made her blood go cold. "What did you say?" he growled, stepping closer. "I said I love you," she whispered again, confused, trying to calm him. "Liar," he shouted. "You've been making a fool of me." His voice was shaking with fury. "You think I don't see what you're doing?" Nia backed away slowly, fear crawling up her spine. "Please, Sekou, I didn't." But before she could finish, he grabbed the heavy wooden stool by the door, and with one cruel swing, he brought it down on her legs. Once, twice. The sound of breaking bones echoed louder than her screams. Nia fell to the ground, crying out in pain, her body curling into itself. The pain was blinding, sharp like fire running through her veins. She reached out, hoping he would stop, hoping he would realize what he had done. But Sekou just stood there, breathing heavily, eyes full of hatred. She couldn't move her legs, couldn't breathe from the shock. Tears streamed down her face, not just from the pain, but from the betrayal. This was the man she had loved, the man she had defended, the man she had believed in when everyone else warned her. Now he had broken her, not just her bones, but something deeper. And in that moment, lying on the floor, Nia knew love should never feel like this. The night felt endless. Nia lay on the cold floor, legs twisted and useless, her cries echoing into the darkness. Sekou had stormed out after the attack, slamming the door behind him like nothing had happened. She was alone, in pain, in fear, in heartbreak. With trembling arms, she began to crawl. Every movement sent shockwaves through her body, but she had no choice. Her voice was hoarse from screaming, but still she called out, "Help! Please! Someone help!" Lights were on in the nearby homes. She could hear dishes clinking, doors shutting, babies crying. But no one came. No one opened a door. No one wanted to be involved. In Makoma, people talked, but they didn't act. They whispered, but they didn't stand. Nia's cries were heard and ignored. Finally, after what felt like forever, she reached her grandmother's house. The door creaked open, and there stood Mama Thandi, her eyes wide with shock, her heart breaking at the sight of her granddaughter, bloodied, broken, and barely breathing. She dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Naya, holding her like she did when she was just a baby, scared of thunderstorms. Tears ran down her wrinkled cheeks as she rocked her gently, whispering again and again, "My child, my sweet child, I'm sorry, Mama," Nia whispered through sobs. "I thought he loved me." Mama Thandi kissed her forehead, her voice shaking but strong. "Even broken wings can fly again," she said. "He may have hurt your body, but your spirit is not his to break." Those words wrapped around Nia like a blanket. She didn't feel strong. She didn't feel brave. But in her grandmother's arms, she felt something stir inside her, something small, but alive. Maybe it was hope. Maybe it was fire. The pain was real. The silence from others was louder than screams. But in that moment, Naya realized something important. She was still here, still breathing, still fighting. And sometimes, survival is the loudest roar of all. The days after the attack were slow and heavy. Nia lay in bed, her legs wrapped in bandages, her heart still aching in places no one could see. The pain didn't just live in her body, it lived in her memories, in her silence, in the pieces of herself she had given to a man who shattered them without a thought. But something had changed. The girl who once waited for love to fix her was gone. In her place, a quiet fire began to burn. Mama Thandi, always nearby, brought her cloth scraps and thread one day. "Keep your hands busy," she said gently. Let them remember how strong you are. Nia stared at the fabric, her fingers unsure at first, but slowly, thread by thread, stitch by stitch, she began to sew. At first, it was just to pass the time. A small pillow, then a scarf, then a simple dress for a neighbor's daughter. But with every needle she pulled, she felt something rise in her. Anger, healing, strength. Her stitches weren't just fabric. They were stories of pain, of survival, of a woman who refused to be broken. The dresses she made were full of color and soul, different from anything the village had ever seen. People started to notice. Women came quietly to her door, not just to buy dresses, but to sit with her, to talk, to feel a little less alone. Nia started selling her work from her bed. Her small room turned into a workshop. Word spread beyond Makoma. Orders came from nearby towns, and with every sale, Nia felt her voice return, not through words, but through the beauty she created with her hands. She still couldn't walk, but she was standing in a new way. She was building something, not just for herself, but for others too. Her fire wasn't loud, but it was steady, burning through the silence, through the pain, through every moment Sekou tried to erase who she was. This time, Nia wasn't waiting to be saved. She was saving herself, one thread at a time. Nia never planned to become a businesswoman. She just wanted to heal, to feel useful again. But as more women came to her door and more dresses left her hands, something bigger began to grow. Her little room in Makoma was no longer just a space for healing. It had become a studio, a movement, a quiet kind of rebellion stitched in fabric. Word traveled fast. Photos of her designs were shared on phones, in markets, even posted on walls in nearby towns. Her style was bold but beautiful. Colors that sang, patterns that told stories, and cuts that made every woman feel seen. One day, a letter came from Lusaka. A well-known fashion group had seen her work and wanted her to showcase her designs at their next event. At first, Nia couldn't believe it. Me? In Lusaka? She whispered, holding the letter and shaking hands. She had never even left Makoma. But Mama Thandi just smiled, her eyes full of pride. Yes, you, my child. You're not the girl who was broken. You're the woman who rose. The journey to Lusaka wasn't easy. Nia was still in a wheelchair, her legs healing slowly. But when the big day came, she dressed in one of her own creations, a long, flowing dress stitched with gold and fire-orange fabric, and wheeled herself into that grand hall with her head held high. The lights were bright. The music played softly. Her dresses moved down the runway on tall, confident models, each one a symbol of her journey. Every piece told a story of pain, courage, of survival. And when the audience stood to applaud, Nia didn't cry. She smiled, a deep, powerful smile that reached all the way back to that girl on the floor, crawling through pain. She wasn't just a designer. She was a message, a proof that broken things can still shine, that even without standing on her feet, she could rise higher than anyone expected. In that moment, Nia was not just the girl from Makoma. She was a businesswoman, an artist, a survivor, and the world was finally watching. Sekou used to walk through Makoma like he owned the ground beneath his feet. People knew his name. Women giggled when he passed by. He wore charm like a jacket, showing it off, using it to get what he wanted. For a while, it worked. He had Nia's love, attention from others, and a sense of power that made him feel untouchable. But time has a way of telling the truth. After what he did to Nia, the whispers began again, only this time they weren't kind. The same women he once flirted with now turned away. The smiles stopped. The jobs he thought he could walk into disappeared one by one. No one wanted to work with a man who broke a woman's legs over a rumor. And then one day, walking through a dusty road in town, Sekou looked up, and there she was, Nia's face, on a giant billboard, wearing one of her own designs, her eyes full of light and strength. The words under her photo read, "From survivor to creator, Nia Designs." His heart dropped. He stood frozen, staring up at the woman he thought he had destroyed. But there she was, bigger than life, more powerful than ever. She hadn't just survived, she had risen higher than he could ever reach. Days later, ashamed but desperate, Sekou showed up at Mama Thandi's door. He tried to act humble, asking to speak to Nia. "I made mistakes," he said. "I want to make things right." Mama Thandi looked him straight in the eyes, calm, cold, silent. Behind her, Nia sat at her sewing table, busy as ever, not even turning to look. No tears, no anger, just silence. The same silence he once gave her when she cried for help. The same silence that left her crawling through pain, completely alone. Sekou waited a moment longer, then quietly turned and walked away, not with pride, not with power, but with the weight of everything he had lost. And as he faded into the distance, Nia kept stitching, not for him, not out of hate, but for herself, and for every woman still finding her own voice. Sekou had fallen, and this time, no one was reaching out to catch him. The hall was filled with women from all walks of life, young, old, rich, poor. Some wore bright colors, others simple dresses. But every seat was taken, and every eye was fixed on the stage where a small ramp led up to the podium. Nia sat near the front, dressed in one of her own designs, a bold royal blue dress with silver patterns that danced like waves. Her wheelchair shined under the lights, but it was her presence that pulled everyone in, calm, fierce, unshaken. When her name was called, the room went quiet. She rolled up to the mic, adjusted it with care, and took a deep breath. Then she looked out at the sea of faces, women who, like her, had known silence, fear, and the ache of being unseen. She began, her voice steady and clear. There was a time I thought love meant keeping quiet, that being a good woman meant accepting pain, that if I just stayed silent long enough, things would get better. She paused. A few women nodded, tears already filling their eyes. "He broke my legs," she said, "but not my will." The room gasped. Some covered their mouths. Others reached for tissues. But Nia didn't break. She kept going. "He thought that by taking away my steps, he could stop my journey. But he didn't know that power doesn't live in the body. It lives in the heart, in the hands, in the voice." She shared her story, not just the pain, but the rise, the stitches, the silence, the fire, and how, with every dress she made, she was sewing herself back together. By the end, the room stood, not slowly, not politely, but all at once. A wave of applause, of cheers, of raw, shaking emotion filled the space. Some women cried openly, others shouted her name. Nia smiled, tears shining in her eyes but not falling. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a voice for those still whispering in fear, a symbol that healing is not weakness. It is the loudest strength. That day, Nia didn't just tell her story. She gave thousands of women the courage to begin writing their own. Nia's journey did not stop on the stage that day. With the strength she found in her pain, she decided to give back to the women who, like her, had been hurt and silenced. She founded an NGO called Wings Without Bones, a place where abused women could find shelter, hope, and a new beginning. The name was powerful, reminding everyone that even without wings, a spirit can still rise and fly. Wings Without Bones quickly became a beacon in Makoma and beyond. Nia and her team offered counseling, skills training, and support for women who had nowhere else to turn. The dresses she created helped fund the project, turning her art into a lifeline for others. One afternoon, years after that dark night, Nia returned to Makoma. But this time, she rolled through the village in her wheelchair, head held high, surrounded by women who had found their voices through Wings Without Bones. The quiet girl who once crawled for help was now a leader, a symbol of courage, and a living example of hope. People stopped to watch as she passed, not with pity, but with respect. Children waved, women smiled, and even some men nodded in admiration. The silence that once surrounded her was gone, replaced by whispers of admiration and stories of strength. In the shadows, Sekou watched. The man who had once controlled her, broken her, and tried to erase her existence, now faded into nothing but a forgotten memory. His power was gone. His name was barely spoken. Nia had risen above it all, not just to survive, but to change the world for women like her. Her story wasn't just about pain anymore. It was about honor, courage, and the unstoppable power of a woman who refused to be broken.